Homily for the 16th Sunday of the Year C. Welcoming Jesus in Contemplative Silence. Our readings for this Sunday are from Genesis chapter 18 verse 1 to 10, Colossians chapter 1 verse 24 to 28, and the Gospel of St. Luke chapter 10 verse 38 to 42. Our first reading shows how Abraham was hospitable to three strangers, not knowing that he was entertaining God himself. His generosity was rewarded with the good news that his wife will conceive and have a son. In the second reading, St. Paul tells us that he rejoices in his many sufferings for the sake of the Gentiles to whom he has been sent as steward of the great mysteries of salvation. The gospel story contrasts the attitude of the two sisters who hosted Jesus at Bethany, Martha and Mary. While Martha was engrossed in activities that are aimed at entertaining Jesus, Mary was engaged in quiet devotion. And when Martha complained that Mary was not helping her to do the chores, Jesus responded that Mary has chosen the better part and it will not be taken from her. The Christian scriptures teach us with several stories what it means to welcome the Lord. Often the Lord appears in the form of a weary stranger or traveler. When such a stranger is welcomed with generosity, kindness, and utmost attention, abundant blessings follow. One of such episodes in the Old Testament is the encounter between Abraham and three angels in Genesis chapter 18 verse 1 to 10. Another episode is the visitation of the widow of Zarephath by prophet Elijah in 1 Kings chapter 17 verse 7 to 24. In both cases, the stranger was given a warm welcome and generously entertained. The result in the case of Abraham is the promise of a son from his wife Sarah. And in the case of the poor widow of Zarephath, it was an end to the prolonged drought that had devastated the land and the raising back to life of the widow's son. Following immediately after the story of the Good Samaritan, the evangelist Luke records the visit of Jesus to the house of his friends Martha and Mary in Bethany, just 3 miles away from Jerusalem, where he was going to face utmost rejection and eventually a brutal death. At the time of his visit to Bethany, Jesus had become a persona non grata for Jewish officials and many individuals who did not want to run into trouble. More and more people would rather not associate with Jesus because of his unconventional ways and what they see as unorthodox teaching. He had become a security risk, his life constantly threatened. Martha and Mary, however, welcomed Jesus into their home with excitement. The young women demonstrated their love for Jesus in different ways. Mary just sat at the feet of Jesus like a disciple in the presence of a rabbi, listening attentively to what the teacher is saying, watching the expressions on his face, and contemplating his words. Martha, on the other hand, was active, very active. She was running up and down between the kitchen and the store and the living room where Jesus was. She was reaching out for warm water to wash his feet and cold water for him to drink. She was all over the kitchen, making sure that in no time food will be ready for the honored guest. She was running breathless, fusing and fretting and becoming overwhelmed with the chores, such that she was getting irritated about her sister Mary, who just sat there with Jesus, letting her alone to do all these chores. Martha eventually complained to Jesus, who, to her astonishment, said that Mary has chosen the better part. After reproaching her for worrying and fretting over many things when only few are needed, he told her that in all her fret and fuss, She had forgotten the one thing that was necessary, which is listening to what the Lord had to say. For Jesus, Mary exemplifies the true disciple, hearing the word and pondering upon it, while in Martha, the word faced the risk of being choked by the cares and worries of the world. The Martha-Mary comparison in this gospel story has a powerful lesson to teach us. That service or social activism must spring from contemplating the face of God, hearing His word, and reflecting upon it. This episode in the Gospel of Luke comes immediately after the Gospel about the Good Samaritan. As if to balance the teaching on service, referring to the Good Samaritan who stretched himself to help an unknown victim, Jesus says, "Do this and you will live." Indeed, the love of neighbor as oneself flows from and is inspired by the love of God with all one's heart, soul, and might. Social activism can become empty and devoid of meaning if the Christian loses focus on the essential element of Christianity, which is the practice of the presence of God, otherwise called prayer. To serve in a manner that one becomes distracted by one's service is to lose touch with the better part. Jesus appreciated the role of both Martha and Mary. The running around of Martha was surely a sign of love for Jesus, of her faith in Him, and of her hope in the salvation that comes through Him. Martha was contributing immensely to the great task of welcoming Jesus. In her own way, she was being the Good Samaritan to Jesus, who was at this time facing rejection on many fronts. But when she started condemning her sister for not joining her in her activism, Jesus had to speak out in defense of Mary. We need many Marthas in our world today, but we need even more Marys who know how to be in the presence of God and how to listen to His word and be guided by it. Too many people today are anxious and troubled about many things, but as Jesus says, only few are important. Jesus does not want His disciples to be troubled. He wants them to live lives of serenity, contentment, and quiet submission to His word and His will. Jesus warns His disciples against allowing the cares of this world to stifle the word. Luke 8:14. He says they should not be anxious about what they will eat or put on. Luke 21:34. He says they should remember that man does not live on bread alone. Luke 4:4. On one occasion, when he had not eaten for a long time and his disciples were worried about him, he answered, "My food is to do the will of the one who sent me." John 4:34. Disciples of Jesus are challenged today to slow down a little. We need quality time to be in touch with ourselves and with our God. But the men and women of the 21st century often find it difficult to slow down, to stop, and to pray. This is perhaps because we are often so preoccupied with achievement, so busy acquiring goods and techniques, and so distracted by the objects of our adventure that we hardly have time to be in touch with the depth of our being, where alone we could connect with God, who is our Creator and ultimate sustainer. Many of us today live very empty and restless lives, urged on by the profit motive and sustained by an aggressively competitive and consumerist culture. We often fill our day with too many appointments and engagements, leaving no room for wholesome relaxation and reflection. We rush from one appointment to the other, and we do not seem to know when to stop, except when we are suddenly halted down by a major illness. We find all sorts of excuses for not praying: our jobs, our appointments, our studies. Even Sundays have become difficult to observe as days of rest. We rush into church a minute or two before Mass starts and dash away as quickly as possible once the priest says the Mass is ended, as if all the while we were in prison. Sundays are filled up with so many activities that for many of us, they are like just any other day of the week. In this way, we are increasingly alienated from the source and the center of our being. No wonder the widespread sense of emptiness, futility, and despair among some of the most successful men and women in our day. No wonder the increasing phenomenon of depression in the population. It is clear that human beings have an inner hunger and thirst that only God can quench. And this can only happen when we find time to rest in Him. And as St. Augustine says, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Thus, to pray is to desire intimacy with God. To pray is to rest in the presence of the Lord. To pray is to contemplate the face of God. To pray is to listen to God. Therefore, the men and women of our generation who desire meaning, fulfillment, and peace must learn how to slow down, how to stop, how to listen, and how to pray. God bless you.